Hello. Are you guys ready to start? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the first question, the origin section of Drutman's book, chapters 1 through 4, traces debates about the utility of political parties from the framers through the 80s in order to explain how we got to the current state of crisis in our American democratic experiment. Here he discusses the anti-partisans, the responsible partisans, and the bipartisans. What does he identify as the merits and the weaknesses of each of these three traditional approaches to the paradox of partisanship? So for anti-partisan, I said one of the merits was from page 31. It says, though the separation of power system didn't prevent parties from forming, it weakened them considerably. So like the separation of powers like just helped them not like have parties for a little bit until it like got to that point, of course.
Mhm. Yeah, and something I found too was on page like kind of going along with that is that on page 52 he was saying that they believe that the parties are the problem, um and that parties distract and divide, and if not for them we would reach consensus by putting the country first. So um yeah, yeah, I guess I don't know where I was going with that, but just kind of like along those lines, I guess.
Okay. And
Is my mic okay, or is it
yeah, it's working.
back?
That's
All
good.
right. So this computer is super old, so I just got to make sure there's not like any glitching happening. But yeah, I was on page 29 and 30, and that's pretty much where I got my answer. The about the where is it? The bipartisans and how they like focus on compromise, and I think that's more of a what describes it. Is that this question? No, it isn't. That's the next question. I'm sorry. But,
Oh yeah. Well, we're looking at like anti-partisan right now.
oh, okay, okay.
For the weaknesses, I said a quote was from page 34. It has crippled American political thought with a deep distrust of political parties. So like course, like America doesn't trust parties right now because of our anti-partisan rhetoric from beforehand. And then it said, and then from page 52, I said, anti-partisans thus attempt to take the politics out of politics to encourage everyone to think independently. This is futile and counterproductive. As a result, the division is a perpetual failure, except perhaps in the smallest, most homogeneous community, sorry. And then yeah, so I said that was one of its weaknesses as well because like um obviously too many parties or too many people like too many individual people being represented isn't really helpful, of course. And yeah, it's just gonna make everybody fight pretty much.
Yeah, I pulled out that same quote actually. Um yeah, it didn't really make sense to me like why they would think that would work.
Yeah,
Um but I don't know.
which
Like
is also
taking yeah,
okay, go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was saying that's also why like I kind of get expanding the House of Reps, but also not really because if too many people get like represented, it's just going to be a shit show. Everybody's just going to be fighting the whole time,
Yeah.
especially with 1,600.
that's wild.
Mhm.
I think anything past 1,000 is
I
too
think a
much.
thousand is a lot.
Yeah, I think maybe 700 at most. But
Yeah.
mm, I was reading. I was like, there's no way that 1600 is going to work because they from the at least the responsible partisans that they like focus on competition, but then that would be like way too much conflict, and then it was just them like eating each other, and then we're back in the same situation
Hmm.
that we have now, just on a larger scale.
You said for responsible partisans.
Yeah, I think yeah, focus on competition, which
Um, for that one, a quote I pulled from page 52 was, America needs more coherent, responsible parties, and once this happens, political competition should produce more accountability. The responsible partisans have a much stronger case than the anti-partisans, given that the realities of modern mass democracy require large representative intermediaries to organize and clarify political conflict. So, like, yeah, responsible parties just like need to know how to work with each other for real.
Mhm.
But I guess one of their weaknesses would be, I said, and this is from page 53. The responsible partisans underestimate how much two party democracy and the separation of power system undermines responsible partisanship.
Mhm.
It is almost impossible to shoehorn all interests into two coherent coalitions without leaving many Americans underrepresented. So, yeah, even with the two party system, a whole bunch of people are gonna not be represented. So, I guess we just kind of need to find a balance, maybe like five parties,
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, that's kind of something that's like the exact one that I pulled out too, that weakness. Um, and then another thing that I feel like could kind of be um well, never mind. I was gonna say that one of their beliefs is that parties are the solution and that they're essential to modern democracy, but like I guess that's kind of the strength in the sense that that's how everything's run
Mm-hmm.
is like by the parties. So I don't know.
I mean, it could be a merit and a weakness
Mhm.
because if parties are the solution, how many parties type of thing.
Yeah, that's true. And then another thing was that they believe that problems emerge when the parties are weak. Um, so I guess it's just that keeping up that level of uh responsibility for the parties or like holding them to that standard, I
Mm-hmm.
guess could create those problems. Yeah.
For sure. Um, Ethan, you want to start us off for bipartisans, the merits and weaknesses?
yes. The bipartisans, I said that the merits were that they focused on compromise, which could allow for further like trust in the government and shows that the government's like actually working. And uh, oh, I'm sorry, I froze. But the that the government's working and it rebuilds trust in the government. But on the flip side, the those compromises could not actually like solve the problem. They could just water down the actual solution, and then you still have the problem, and then that leads to like extreme parties like the Tea Party
Yeah.
with so much compromise that no actual solution is solved.
Mm, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. Um, for the weakness, I pulled this from page 53. It said bipartisans confuse effects for causes. So pretty much like it also said like politicians don't get to know each other anymore nowadays. It's like each party trying to win the next election. So although they do want to have cooperation and compromise, like in reality and practice, it's not working.
Mhm.
And then, like you said, like too much cooperation and compromise is going to water down solutions. But like absolutely none also does absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, like something's better than nothing.
Yeah.
So then the next one, which of the three do you think best describes the way you've most often thought about American politics and why? Um, I said responsible partisans just because it makes the most sense, I guess, in relation to how I've thought about, well, like the question is asking, but how I've thought about politics, I guess, and just like they're I guess I kind of agree with the fact that problems can emerge when parties are too weak. Because if if there's problems on the inside, um, that can weaken the like ideals and stuff like that. So, and then the idea that two parties are what make democracy work, just because that's all I've known is the Democratic and Republican Party and all that stuff. So,
Mine was kind of along the same lines, but I said bipartisan. Just because like our government right now is like bipartisan, and then what's it called? I said um like when I was talking about one of the weaknesses, how like politicians don't get along anymore and they don't like compromise. Like that's just what I've always thought of America. Like it's always like Dems versus Republicans. They're always fighting and stuff. So I guess I always thought of it as like the weak part of the bipartisans. And it's not very good practice.
Yeah, I also said the bipartisan. I look like when I because I love looking at American history, but it's just like all throughout, just well, not all throughout, but most parts during like the progressive era, the New Deal, or the era of good feelings, there was a lot of bipartisanship, and there is sprinkled in, I would say, responsible partisanship of just like high friction between the parties, like the lead up to the Jackson era and the Civil War, and right now.
Yeah. So I guess they definitely tried to start with the repart. I feel like it's kind of like a timeline. Like they went from anti-partisan to responsible and then bipartisan and the bad parts of each and then the good parts of each, respectively. So for number two, it says Drutman. Is it Drutman or Drutman?
Vincent
I
Drutman.
definitely do.
Drutman transitions from talking about the recent past in chapter 4 to the present in chapters 5 to 7. His contemporary crisis section, arguing that not so long ago, the 1960s to the 80s, we had a hidden four-party system that prevented the doom he associates with our now cemented, intractable, fully sorted two-party system. What does he say previously explain the ability of the two parties to avoid the catastrophic levels of dysfunction that it experiences today? Um, from pages 110 to 111, I pulled a quote. Well, first I said there was a conservative caucus in the Dems, but when the Republicans decided to take over the remaining seats held by these conservatives, the party naturally became very liberal with like no conservative influence anymore. And this made the two parties, of course, start to polarize. And I feel like this is kind of what really like started this doom loop that we're in. And then the quote I pulled from 110 to 111, it said, it's just talking about the, in 2010, how 28 of the 54 remaining Blue Dog Democrats lost. So mostly all of them left, and it was all taken by conservative Republican seats. And then with the bipartisanship of the parties, obviously the Dems didn't really want to agree with the conservative Republicans. So yeah, they just kind of
Um, this question, like, I really didn't understand it, so I kind of just focused on what he was talking about in, I think it's chapter 5. Yeah, because page 122 is where I pulled some of my information from, but he talks a lot about the impact of the 2010s on the two-party system, and that I guess just the um for the ability of the two parties to avoid catastrophic levels of dysfunction was that before the 2010s, political enemies were opponents. Um, and that now it's just about politics, about winning and losing. So, um, in the before like the 2010s, when I think I can't remember if it was the same chapter, but he said that the 2010s is when the two-party system was like solidified.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I guess just before that, it seemed that the um, like opponents and people running for president would just get along easier and appeal to both sides. But now it's just all about the competition, I guess.
Yeah, the yeah, the 2010, I think the midterms saw pretty much like the complete elimination of the conservative Democrats and or the blue dog Democrats, and the liberal Republicans were pretty much wiped out. I think in the 80s, if I'm remembering, with Reagan, and yeah,
Do you know if there's any conservative Democrats anymore? Like, kind of.
I would say Manchin. He's on his way out. Uh, I think that's probably a big problem is because there's only liberals in one party and conservatives in the other, and that's why
Yeah.
there was so much compromise back in the day because there was a lot of liberals and conservatives in each party.
Yeah. The what did it say? Hidden four party system. I feel like that would have been so helpful right now, especially. But we have, well, I feel like we kind of do have like a three-party system in a way with the Tea Party pretty much, like, even though it's a faction, like, I feel like that's just a more extreme version of what the Republicans were back in like 2010.
Yeah,
And then now, like, the GOP as a whole is just like the liberal part of Republicans, even though they're not too liberal.
no,
But yeah, I don't think.
yeah. The Tea Party is so far right it makes the rest of the GOP look liberal.
Yeah, literally. But I feel like, yeah, it's definitely like three kind of, because I don't think the Dems have any. Do they have anything that's like super pushing right now? Like,
No, I think they're pretty unified. They don't
okay.
really have. They have some like more liberal members, but they pretty much fall in line with the
I
main
feel
party.
like it's so easy to be unified on that side, anyways, because like even though if you're super far left, most of your ideals do align with like Dems as a
Yeah.
whole. Okay. What does he mean when he argues that today's crisis has been spurred by the nationalization of identity politics and culture war politics? I said he means that as these two politics grow more popular, like it just ignites the parties to polarize more because the conservatives aren't really worried about these things and the Dems are. And a quote I pulled was the character and quality of national political fights depend fundamentally on the issues that divide political parties from each other. That's from page 124.
Yeah, I kind of talked about with identity politics for like the voters side where voters feel the need that to resonate with either one side of the or the other. Um or I think he talked about too, like people resonating with a side that they feel just represents them like enough, like it's good enough. Um and then like in chapter 7, he was saying that we repeatedly override our own judgments to conform to our peer group. So it's like we have the need to resonate with a certain side, but then also um we're so influenced by our peers, I guess.
Mhm.
Um that it's like the identity of it gets like easy, I guess.
Do you want to add anything to that, you think?
I'll be honest with you, I was kind of lost on this question. So
Yeah, I think me
yeah.
and Anna definitely answered that differently, but I think you answered it correctly, Anna, because I didn't know what identity politics meant. I
Mhm.
thought it was just talking about like I don't know, like LGBT rights or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember and I couldn't it might be where I pulled this quote from. I just couldn't find it, but um I'm pretty sure it was chapter 7. He talked a lot about how just like the influence on political parties and how people identify with the parties, I guess, and feeling the need to identify with either side.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, can you think of any examples to support his characterization of today's toxic politics, and or do you think he's overlooked anything important in his discussion of where today's toxicity comes from? The quote I pulled is from page 111, and 6 years of divided government followed, talking about like the 2010 stuff, while making ground to a halt and trust in the government hit new lows. So like the toxicity of the government today obviously causes distrust because nothing's getting done. Like no laws are being passed and whatnot. These people are constantly fighting against each other when they need to be fighting for us. So
Yeah, I really would have liked to see more of the him cover the Great Recession, because I really think that's like the reason why there's so much like radicalism, is because of the uh, failed response to it. And I would have liked to see like a more in depth analysis, or more of in depth analysis on the Great Recession.
mhm. Okay. Chapter 7 discusses the normative importance of the fundamental democratic norm of shared fairness. I'm not gonna lie, this question kind of messed me up. I was really confused.
Me too.
Um, in a healthy democracy, before chronicling some of the modern threats to that norm that create what he calls a doom loop, a, a reinforcing feedback loop, and a death spiral, and kind of trap where once you get stuck inside, it's tricky to spring loose. What are some of the violations of this norm of shared fairness that Drutman finds so deleterious to the legitimacy of democracy, and why does he think that their existence leads to a vicious cycle that can only be broken by drastic measures? Um, a quote I pulled was from page 159. Political opponents need to be free to attack each other enough to draw out their differences. This is the paradox of partisanship. Again, it's hard to get the balance just right. Oh, like we were saying, too much comedy between parties deprives voters of competition and accountability. Too much contrast between parties and mutual toleration breaks down. So, yeah, why does he think? existent leads to a vicious cycle that can only be. Yeah, I don't know. I guess so. I guess to answer the question, like, I guess he thinks their existence leads to this vicious cycle because we can't find an in between like being completely um on the same side and compromising, or like just completely fighting and not wanting to hear what the other side wants to say.
Yeah, I how I kind of took it was I focused mostly on the shared fairness aspect. Like there isn't really a shared fairness aspect of democracy because in like kind of what I was saying before that there isn't really another choice besides like in terms of voting besides Democrat or Republican. So there's less freedom in that sense of and um and then in terms of like parties with the a quote that I pulled from chapter 4 was that in the mid 1990s Democrats and Republican also began speaking in separate languages, talking past each other and to different audiences. So kind of what Kiana you were saying about there's no like middle, I guess, because the Democrats and Republicans are only appealing to like, I guess, I don't want to say like who they already have like in because obviously they're trying to like get more votes or whatever, but um it seems like they're just trying to appeal to one audience rather than everyone.
Yeah.
I feel like
That makes any sense.
Lord, my throat. Yeah, I feel like a big part of that is uh, like they have to appeal to like their extremes to win the primary, so they can be the actual candidate. And I feel like that would limit them, like in a general election, because they can't really stray too far away from the extreme, or they will just not turn out to vote, and then they'll lose the election to whoever their opponent is.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when the parties shift, that's kind of what happened.
Mhm.
The Dems were trying to appeal too much to the civil rights, I guess.
Mm.
Um, you weren't required to read chapters 8 through 10 is the solution section, but in other parts of the text, he alluded to a number of potential solutions that you may be familiar with. Three of the ideas involved the following: A, adopting ranked choice voting, B, expanding the size of the House of Reps, and C, eliminating congressional primary elections. Based on what you know about these ideas from class lectures, other parts of the book, outside knowledge and research, do you think any of them could help restore the norm of shared fairness that Drutman seems so crucial to electoral democracy? Why? I said I think that expanding the House of Reps would help a little bit with this idea of shared fairness, allowing more people to be represented. Of course, allows more fairness in turn, and more overlapping ideas with different parties will force people to come together in some way, shape, or form. But like we said earlier before, like maybe not too many, just like a little handful extra.
Mm.
Yeah, um, yeah, I would probably expand it to the house as well. But yeah, definitely only a handful. I don't really know a lot about ranked choice voting. I kind of like the 2 round system where everyone can run, and then whoever got the most amount can run in the second round, the top two. I much prefer that system. But and I am, after reading a lot, supportive of eliminating or at least modifying congressional primaries. So it gives uh, radicals less chance of getting through and winning elections.
Yeah. I said ranked choice voting, like from the viewpoint of a voter, because um he talked a lot about how, or I guess like in class we talked about too, like how people aren't voting really anymore because when they feel like their vote like won't count. Um, so I feel like ranked choice voting could sort of eliminate that. Um, because it's like if their first choice doesn't win, the second choice, I guess, kind of I'm like reading a thing at the same time. Is like, yeah, your ballot still counts for your next choice. Um, so I guess it would encourage more voting. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I definitely would like ranked choice voting to happen as well, because more people kind of like, in a way, especially if they do it like how, what was that? Indiana? What video did we watch? Iowa?
The I forget what it's called, but yeah, when they're all in the gym.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the call.
yeah.
Yeah,
The
the
way that they did
caucus.
it there was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Just showing. Well, I'm assuming that's how they do it usually, but like, yeah, just seeing that like that makes a lot of sense, quite honestly, to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you guys have anything about like? Oh, never mind. We already said eliminate congressional primary elections. Okay, so the introduction of the book includes a section called "Why I Wrote This Book." Therein, Drutman writes that when I see dysfunctional systems, I always think that there ought to be a better way. He represents his credentials by reminding us that he's a political junkie and a political scientist, and that in the research for his book, he studied democracies across the globe and revisited the history of our own country's framing. Later in chapter 2, he tells us about other political scientists in the 1940s to the 50s who saw a problem with the way American parties operated. However, he argues that in hindsight, their solution actually exacerbated today's crisis that he seeks to fix. Given this admission about the fallibility of political scientists of the past, how much weight do you think we should give Drutman's arguments? Um, I said I think because he is American, we should hold some type of value because he's seen like the parties like play out from a first person's perspective. So I think his arguments will have some type of meaningful insight. But of course, theory's always changing, so we shouldn't like stick with this. We should use it to like possibly create more parsimonious theories along the way. Um, and we can use his arguments like as stepping stones for sure, or even like expand it into like smaller theories for sure. But like, yeah, since it's ever changing, like take it with a grain of salt, but also like definitely hold it to some standard.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I kind of said too, like, I kind of liked the Doom Loop analogy. Um, just because it just made sense to me. And I felt like it was, for me, it was a help when I was reading, it was a helpful way to look at the different aspects of government and how connected they are and how they affect each other. Just because sometimes that's hard for me to understand. Um, so I think the even just like taking Doom out of it, because like stuff that's like some of it like isn't bad, but just thinking of that kind of analogy of like the connectedness of everybody was helpful for me throughout the book. So in that sense, I think it was good.
Yeah. I would probably also describe myself as a political junkie. I really love everything to do with politics, but I do have to, yeah, you have to understand that there's, when you're so in tuned to politics, a lot of the majority of Americans are not in tune to politics. So your solutions are not going to work with the majority of people because you uh, are so in tune with this stuff that there's a lot of people are just not really on board with it. Now, I really like his arguments, and I'm sure that uh, some of them will definitely will hold up through time.
So do you think he should like think of, I guess, more basic ways to like
Yeah, I feel like just moderate your the position to appeal to like a larger group of people,
okay. Yeah.
at least to make it succeed, to at least pass something.
Yeah, because even like even as a political science major, I thought some of his like arguments were like, okay, I don't like the House of Reps growing is a little crazy, just a little bit.
Yeah, I forgot who mentioned it in class, but about expanding government and having like six or like over like 1,000 new politicians. I don't know if a lot of Americans would like that. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, because they were like, I don't want a politician. I
mhm.
don't want more politicians. That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I remember that. I forgot who said that too. Okay. Do you buy his argument that the problem is as serious and or intractable as it is today? Um, yes, just because of literally like what you said, like people aren't as in tune with politics. So I feel like these solutions and these problems seem very like out of touch or just a little crazy for the mass majority of people in America. But we do like I definitely think it is pretty like serious because I don't think anybody really agrees with our bipartisanship and how toxic it is. But um, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said like there is a problem, but I feel like it's not as extreme as Trump was like making it out to be, and that there's issues in politics, but that's not something that will be going away ever. Um, so
Yeah, I think the problem kind of is just, or it's definitely more apparent on like the national level. Like when you get lower and lower, like to local governments, it's a lot less crazy, or at least from my experience, a lot less like hostile. Though, yeah.
um, okay. Do you think that his proposed solutions would work if enacted? Do you think it's realistic to talk about these proposals as if they could be enacted? Why? I said I think his House of Reps solution could possibly work if it was executed properly, of course. And I think it would make more sense to do it maybe all at once and not gradually, because if we bring more people in gradually, one, legislation takes forever to get through. So
Mhm.
um, if we wait too much time, I feel like the people getting added will just eventually um, like align with one party anyways and just feel like they have to stay in the bipartisanship in the first place. Whereas if we have a whole bunch of people come in, it's more combative when it first starts, but of course like they would hopefully start to compromise after a while. But like compromise in a way that's like these new people coming in are independents. And then we have the Dems and the Republicans. Um, but honestly, I said I don't think these are worth talking about because, like Anna said, these problems aren't like too like serious. And then like I just don't think it'll ever happen. So it's like they're very good solutions, but I feel like to talk about them as solutions that could be happening is pointless because we know that it's not going to happen in America ever, or not for a while unless some people start to get crazy and like, all right, we're done with this. But I doubt it's going to happen because we are very much conditioned in America.
I actually said like for talking about it, for me, like personally, I thought um it was like interesting to hear the solutions because I am not really a political junkie and I don't really understand politics that much. And so for me, hearing ideas that maybe could help, like whether they're enacted or not, just allowed for more open discussion about the issues. Um, and just got me thinking and then wanting to learn about it more. So in that sense, I think it's worth talking about, but in the sense of if it could be enacted, I agree, like I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah. My big problem with like I think we should definitely expand the House, but then there's the next problem is the Senate. If you're expanding the House but you're not expanding the Senate, then nothing's going to happen. And then say you expand the House and you don't solve gerrymandering, then you're going to get highly partisan people again, just
Mhm.
on a larger level. So I think it definitely needs the proposal definitely needs to get worked on a bit, and uh, then maybe try it again.
Yeah, because he didn't offer like really any like specific solution. He just said like, hey, let's expand the reps,
Mm.
expand how many people are represented. But um okay, expanding the Senate, how would you think that would help?
Um, I well the Senate's definitely because you're going to need an amendment for that, but the because if say if the House is at like 800 or something, there's still only 100 people in the Senate, then there's a normal ratio would be like 52 Democrats and then a couple independents and the rest are Republicans. They're still going to be like, oh, I'm going to filibuster this bill. And say if the new House of Representatives is passing so many bills, they're just dead on arrival in the Senate because of they can't get to like I think it's 60 votes they need to break a filibuster,
Mm,
and then it's just the same deadlock. So I feel like expanding the Senate would allow for a more representation, like the same argument for expanding the House, and hopefully there's no filibustering.
yeah. Okay. Any last words? Are we he's come or he's like talking to us on Thursday, right?
I think so.
Okay.
I thought today was Thursday.
Okay. Well, I'll see you guys later.
Awesome. All
Yeah,
right, see you.
Bye.
bye.